So good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Catherine Pei, and I want to welcome you to the final webinar of the academic year in the Family Webinar Series. I am the director of the First Year Center, and tonight I am joined by my colleagues and senior leadership from the Division of Student Affairs, who I will introduce shortly. We are very excited you have chosen to join us for tonight's conversation, and I've got a little bit of information before we begin. First, you will notice that you have the ability to submit messages to us during this webinar using the chat function. You will also be able to use the Q&A box as well. Please use these features to message us about any logistical questions related to the webinar, particularly the private chat function. For example, if you're having trouble hearing us or you need clarification on how to submit a question, please chat to the First Year Center Zoom account. So we're gonna go ahead and make sure you know how to use that chat feature. So if you could just put in the chat feature where you are tuning in from. We're going to name a few of those locations on air. And another note, there is a severe thunderstorm warning moving through St. Louis right now, and so that may impact the connectivity of some of our panelists, including me. And so if any of us disappear or pop in and out, we apologize in advance, but there should be enough of us in different areas of St. Louis that at any given point, at least one of us, I should hope, will have connectivity. So we appreciate your flexibility and patience with us. Like you, we are all getting used to using a lot of bandwidth on our home internet connections, and sometimes it's working a little bit better than others. While you are all letting us know where you're coming from in that chat feature, we also want to make sure you know how you can submit questions during this webinar. You're more than welcome to submit questions in the private chat feature if you have a private question you'd like to ask, but you can also ask questions using the Q&A feature. So we have two professional staff members within the First Year Center who are helping us to field these questions this evening. They will answer questions privately in the Q&A if they maybe are more nuanced or individualized, and then questions that we find applicable to the audience as a whole, we will make sure that we answer on this webinar live. And then any questions that we might not be able to get to before the end of this webinar, we will email you an answer to by the end of this week. And then lastly, this webinar is being recorded live. Next week, we will upload it to the families.worcester.edu website, so you can go back and review what we have shared and then also share with other families who maybe weren't able to join us this evening. So before passing this along to our panelists, I want to share some of the places that you all are joining us from. So we have families tuning in from El Paso, Texas, Park Ridge, Illinois, Clearwater, Florida, and more than 200 other locations this evening. So thank you all for being here with us. And now, since I know you really want to hear from my colleagues in Student Affairs leadership, I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, beginning with Dr. White. And then once those introductions are complete, Dr. White will share some reflections on the fall 2020 semester as a whole. So Dr. White, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe and well wherever you are. I'm Lori White, and I'm the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rob Wild. I'm Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Dean of Students, and I just want to say hello to all of you. Welcome. We're hoping to be able to answer a lot of your questions, and I did see flash across the bottom of the screen somebody from my hometown of Rochester, New York, so go Western New York State. All right.
I'm Mark Smith, and I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for basically for the Career Center, Dean of Career Services.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kirk Dougher. I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Support and Wellness. And a shout out to folks that I see logging in from Fort Lauderdale and near Reno, Nevada, areas where I've lived before. So welcome.
Good evening. My name is Kawanna Leggett. I'm the Executive Director for Residential Life.
So thank you to all of my colleagues. Dr. White, would you like to share some thoughts on this semester with everyone?
Sure. So when I first met most of you, it was during a new student and family convocation when you moved your students in for your first year. And I got the chance to see so many of you when you brought your students back, those of you who are families and parents of returning students. And certainly we never expected this semester, this spring semester, to end so abruptly the way that it did. We are living in unprecedented times, and none of us, I've worked in higher education for almost 40 years, and none of us have ever experienced anything like what we experienced this past semester. And so I hope your students are adjusting to learning remotely. I know our faculty have worked really, really hard to deliver remote instruction. I know our staff and student affairs have been doing all that we can to make sure that we keep in close contact with your students and provide whatever support we can to them remotely. And we're here today on this Zoom webinar to be able to answer any of your questions about this semester. And we don't know anything yet about fall. But we are working very diligently to be able to provide some information to you very soon about what fall semester will look like. So with that, why don't we open it up for the many questions that I know that you have of us. And I look forward to the opportunity to connect with you on Zoom.
Thank you, Dr. White. As a reminder to our families, you can send us questions using the Q&A feature. We've received a few already, but please feel free to utilize that. And then we will be answering the questions that were submitted in advance that were emailed to us. So our first question is for you, Rob. What resources are available to families hoping to stay informed about the university's COVID-19 response?
Great, and thank you for flashing the screen here to show the resources. We are obviously, things are changing fast, and we have decided that we are going to put everything linked from the university's emergency website. So the easiest way for me to tell you is to go to emergency.wustl.edu, and right in the middle is the COVID-19 page that has information that's added to it regularly. The function that I use a lot and I refer a lot to people is there's an FAQ, a frequently asked questions bar on the side that you can look for students specifically to see information, and we're constantly updating that. To give you all a little preview, I appreciate all of you coming onto the webinar tonight. We actually are working on another communication that's going to go out to all of your students tomorrow with some updates. One of the challenges we've had, obviously things have been changing so quickly here on the ground in St. Louis as well as nationally, is that we felt that it's been important to share information when we have information to share. And so tomorrow we're going to provide some updates on a few things we're going to talk about on the call tonight. One of the things that I just want to reiterate that Lori talked about, and we're happy to speak about more specifically on this webinar this evening, are the university's plans for the fall semester. I'm going to just start very high level and say we are going to have a fall semester. The Chancellor convened a group called the Fall Contingency Planning Committee that I'm serving on that has been meeting. And we are working through our plans for what the fall semester could look like. Obviously, we don't know today, very few universities know today what the national and local public health recommendations are going to be for late August. But we are trying to be flexible, fluid with our planning, and plan lots of different scenarios so that we can, when we bring people back, we're doing so in a way that's safe. And you're going to find out from us before too long what our plans are. I can't put an exact date on it. We obviously, what we want to be able to do is have a little bit more time to make sure that we're making a good choice with our fall. So, but it'll be in the early part of the summer because we know that's when you all need to know your own plans for the fall. So I'll stop there, and I know there may be other questions about that later.
I was on mute. Thank you, Rob. Our next question is for Kirk. One family member says, we appreciate all the work Habit Health and Wellness has put in the past few weeks to keep our students safe and informed. And I will add, we also are really grateful for you helping to keep faculty and staff safe as well. How have Habit staff been able to take care of themselves during this time?
This is a really good question. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness behind it. It seems that a lot of our folks, especially the helpers, and sometimes we wonder who's helping the helpers, as that's become ever more apparent to us over the course of especially our last few days and weeks, but over the last couple of years as well. We're trying to stay in touch throughout my health and wellness line. That also includes Habit Medical and WashU Cares and an office we call RSVP that deals with interpersonal relationship violence. And we're trying to make sure that they're all on top of what it is that's going on, not only for them, but what's going on for the rest of their staff as well. So we engage in all sorts of attempts to be able to make sure that we're checking in with one another, self-care, we're reading through articles. I sent out another article today on burnout and what we call compassion fatigue, which, you know, when you're caring for others, sometimes that can take a toll. And that's just certainly not limited to the folks that work in my downline, but certainly across the board. And in fact, all of the student affairs, folks are very good at being able to care for our students, and sometimes need a reminder to be able to take care of themselves. So we try and take some very deliberate and diligent steps to make sure that we're there for them, that we're listening, and we're trying to assist where possible to make sure that they can remain right on point so that they can assist our students to the best of their ability. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Kirk, for everything that you and your team have been doing for us. It is very much appreciated. So Mark, our next question is for you. A lot of families have been asking what resources are available to students who may have lost their summer internship or other plans for summer due to COVID.
Right. So, so while some internships have been canceled, and while there's some uncertainty, many internships are still going forward. And I think there may be some misconceptions about that. Some of them are being done virtually. Having said all that, our staff is here. So we've put up some resources, and some of it's summarized in this slide you're seeing about what your student can do this summer. But the first thing I would have them do is connect with one of our counselors. They're here, they're at work. We're doing phone call appointments and Zoom and Skype appointments every day, and that's perfectly appropriate. While and many internships don't come about until May or June. So, what I've noticed with employers are many are still, kind of deciding what they're going to do, say, waiting till June 1st. So I think there's still a lot of possibilities. Having said that, many years students don't have the opportunity to do a formal internship. So, I think we want the students thinking about their personal skills and how they'll develop them. There are other ways to do that besides an internship. Maybe if what I want to do is something with writing and I get shut out from internships, maybe I create a WordPress blog that summer. So I've got some product that I can show and share with other people. Maybe I work on my skills. Maybe it's a formal, maybe I go to summer school, but maybe it's just some online courses and I work on a language or some technical skills or whatever. So I don't want your students, and I have college age kids, and I see some of this with them saying, well, there's nothing out there, so I shouldn't try. They should keep trying. We're here to help them, and we want to do that. So I can talk more about it if people have questions, and feel free to email me. I'm happy to reach out to your children.
And we'll make sure we put Mark's contact information as well as the Career Center's information in the chat function for you all. So thank you for that, Mark. I want to make sure we address a housing related question. We received this many times in advance of tonight's webinar, and then I'm seeing it come across quite often in the Q&A. So Kawanna, this one's for you. When do you anticipate releasing more information about when students can retrieve their belongings from the residence halls?
Well, as Rob said earlier, we are sending a communication out tomorrow to our students, and that will include a little bit more information about belongings in the residence hall. Please rest assured, I want the belongings to your students as much as you want the belongings. This is helping our ability to get our spaces prepared in August. So know that we are trying our best to get our items and our students reconnected. However, we have some challenges ahead of us because we're still under St. Louis County and St. Louis City stay-at-home orders. And so right now our staff are unable to do any work that requires them to be able to help with this process. So that is slowing us down, and we'll have to navigate that and monitor when that will be lifted. Once it is lifted, and we do hope that will happen pretty soon, we're going to try to work on a window where students will be able to return in the summer, early summer, hopefully, to be able to register and come in a timely, orderly fashion to retrieve their items. We know that all students won't be able to come back to St. Louis, and so we are working to create some opportunities for packing and shipping some items, and we're also working to provide convenient storage locations here in St. Louis. So all this to say, we want your items back with your students, and we're working on a process, and that will be aligned in the communication hopefully tomorrow that goes out.
Thank you so much, Kawanna. So let's get to some other questions that we're receiving. We received several questions from families of international students. We have some families joining us from Shanghai and other places in East Asia. I know for the families in Shanghai, I believe it's 6:45 a.m. So thank you so much for joining us right now. If we have students who come from outside the United States and they are looking to find a summer internship in the United States after the semester has ended, how is OISS able to help those students with maybe required documentation? Mark or Rob, are you able to answer that question?
So I'll take a stab at the resources available to assist, and then Mark, if you want to talk about the internships. So we even though, as you can see, I'm sitting here in my basement in St. Louis, and all of us are mostly working from home here in St. Louis, our Office of International Students and Scholars is fully staffed, and actually, as my colleagues in Shanghai may be aware, dealing with a lot of questions that are coming up as the United States travel guidelines issued by the State Department are continuing to shift, and so we need to be able to support our students. I would say for anybody who has a specific student question about their status in the United States, please reach out to the staff in the Office of International Students and Scholars. Dakota, who's monitoring this call, can put the contact information into the chat for us so you can see that. But we do stand ready. We're talking to students every day. We have been since March 11th to assist with things like those questions.
And then as far as the career side of it, I mean, like I said, we're here to help students. I do think, it's always tougher for international students, or the U.S. government has made it tougher, although they do have the OPT that they can use over the summer and all of their summers. And so, and OIS has, Office of International Students and Scholars, a great partner with us on that. Some challenges, and I think everyone knows this, certainly in the States, but around the world, many cities are doing shelter-in-place orders where it becomes more difficult to do anything but a virtual internship where you're working from home. Many employers are dealing with that. Some are having more of a problem with it.
Thank you. Pertinent to our international students, but I think many other students as well, would the university recommend that international students travel home for the summer or stay in the United States? What about other summer travel plans that students may have had to visit other places in the United States or around the world? I know it's really early to answer, but Rob, any thoughts about that as you all have been planning for the fall?
Oh boy, that is the question of the hour. I've talked to some families about that. It's, there's many factors that go into that. We've talked to some of our families who, given the large number of active cases of COVID-19 still in the United States, are not interested in having their students travel home right now, which we totally understand and are happy to work with students who have questions about other options. I should say, one thing we didn't explain, and we may have some people on the call who this affects, one of the decisions that we made on March 11th when we told our students not to return from spring break is that we actually did have a number of students who were on campus over spring break and who asked us if they could return from spring break to their residential assignment. And we have kept the residence halls open, and we have notified students who are with us about how they can request housing for the summer. That notification, I think, went out earlier this week. The numbers are low. We started with a little over 400 students, and as of this week, we have about 200 students living in residence. But we know for international students, many of them have chosen to stay. In terms of that question about what to do with this summer, it is hard to know for my folks on the call around the United States. Every region is a little bit different. It does, here in Missouri, the governor has announced that the stay-at-home orders across the state will be lifted on Monday, this next Monday, May 4th. But the municipalities where the university are, including St. Louis County and St. Louis City, appear to be taking a more stringent approach, and have not made a decision about that yet. And across the river in Illinois, which is very close, the governor there has said that we're not lifting the stay-at-home orders till the end of May. So I think it just depends on this circumstance. Mark Smith has gotten a lot of questions about New York City internships, like we always do, and those are challenging. It's kind of a company by company basis, and many of them we've discovered are not welcoming in-person internships this summer. In terms of traveling home, again, it's a very personal family decision. We are here in the Office of International Students and Scholars to provide the very latest information that we receive from the State Department here in the United States about travel restrictions to and from the United States. Due to some of the State Department changes, particularly for travel to Asia, one of the reasons the residence hall numbers went down is we had students choose to go home. So again, I guess I would just say to that, that's a great question. And I would say we stand ready to talk with you and try to answer questions we can about those things.
Thanks, Rob. I know it's a lot of unknowns as we're trying to make this plan for you and your committee. Kirk, I have a question for you. For students currently, as we're ending the semester and we're looking to finals, what type of mental health resources are currently available to students? Are there virtual sessions available for counseling? If not, what other resources could you recommend at the time?
Yeah, certainly a great question. We have our therapists that are available to be able to see students are doing so in an encrypted format through Zoom. And so that allows us to be able to communicate and have sessions with some of the students. Now, part of the difficulty is obviously no one anticipated all of the controversial ways in which laws conflict with one another. So what we're facing is some situations where going across state lines has some restrictions on who can see which therapist where. And for each different licensure that our staff hold, there end up being different restrictions for each state that they are trying to be able to zoom into. So suffice it to say, we're trying to be able to engage with students where we can. Where that's not possible, certainly we are reaching out to those students and doing some check-ins that are not therapeutic necessarily in nature. We're additionally offering some educational workshops, some group discussions, and some other formats that we're trying to be able to make sure that students can feel connected. When that is insufficient, however, we also have some providers that engage with students directly for the purpose of trying to make sure that they can get connected to a provider in their local area. And so we will walk through a number of different things with them, look at their insurance plan, who might be on the list, what type of therapeutic services they are interested or in need of, and try and make sure that they get connected with some local providers. In addition, we're also trying to make sure that these students have the resources that they need from the various offices around campus as well. So some of those are continuing through Zoom and other services. So we're just trying to be able to do the same types of things, but port it over to a telemedicine environment where possible.
Thank you. Kawanna, I have a couple of housing and then some dining questions as well. And I know dining doesn't report to you, but I think you know the answer. So thinking about students looking to the fall semester, has WashU extended the deadline for families to consider whether or not they can pull out of their housing contract? What if a family or a student chooses to take a leave of absence for the fall?
Yes, the original deadline to cancel housing without penalty was March 31st. We extended that till April 15th, and we're still collecting cancellations, and parents and families have until June 15th to cancel their housing contract. There is a small penalty of $500, but certainly we're working with families on a case-by-case basis if things have changed. We want to be very mindful that we are still placing our returning students, and so we are doing administrative assignments and beginning our placement process for the first year's class as well. So again, we are collecting cancellations up until June 15th and working with folks. And so feel free to email the Office of Residential Life at reslife@worcester.edu, and we're happy to sit down and talk with any impacted families who may be changing. For folks that are withdrawing from campus, know that you can cancel your housing at any time without any penalty.
Thank you. And then a follow-up question about dining for you, Kawanna. For students who have remained on campus since spring break, what's happening to their remaining meal points if they have some left at the end of the semester?
So for our students who are currently on campus, they have access to use their meal points. Those unused meal points, most likely, and I don't want to speak for dining services, they will refund those students back. But again, I don't want to speak for dining services.
We will find the answer to that, and we will follow up with everyone on this webinar afterwards. Mark, lots of questions about career and internships in graduate schools. Some of the answers I know we have, and some maybe are not up to us. So I'm gonna ask a graduate school question. Have you heard from graduate programs if they are being flexible with students who maybe would typically be required to have a lab in person or an internship experience, or take the GRE and haven't been able to do so thus far?
Right. So the post-grad school that I'm most familiar with is law school, because I'm one of the pre-law advisors, and I think their approach is the same as other schools' approaches. They understand this is an extraordinary situation, that everyone is in the same boat. So, for example, the LSAC, the LSAT people have specifically said, we are sending a notice with every transcript that reminds people this was when we had the coronavirus, and so it is fine that the student has all pass-fail courses for the semester. And I've seen from a number of top law schools saying, we understand that and we're not going to have any problem with that. And similarly with internships, they know this is a different summer. So I think the one place where it may be a little trickier is medical school, and there may be some requirements there, but I would just reach out to the pre-med advisors or pre-health advisors. I know Carolyn Herman, who's in the Arts and Sciences Dean's office, is keeping up to speed on that and would be a good resource for that. But, everyone knows what's going on, so they're not saying, the students are not going to be penalized because of this. So I don't want students or parents worrying about that.
Thank you. Follow-up question for you, Mark. Given that many students will need to switch to unpaid internships this summer or look at maybe alternative opportunities, are there continued opportunities for students to apply for stipends or other kinds of support, maybe so that a student could explore those?
Yes, there are. We're continuing our stipend program. The stipend program is, the priority is given to students with financial need. And we want to make sure that students, a safety issue, that they're complying with WashU's kind of travel guidance and with, local and state guidance when it comes to whether it's shelter in place or whatever. And so, but we are still seeing students apply, and they're doing a virtual internship, and that's perfectly appropriate.
Mark, I'd like to add, I'd really like to thank all the parents out there. Many of you have contributed to helping to support our students, either through the unpaid internship program or through our emergency grant fund or through other funds that we have to support students. So really want to thank you, those of you who've been able to make those contributions.
Yeah, that bears repeating. As somebody who was a first-generation college student and went to a school like WashU, my first summer I worked at a factory. My third summer I worked in a bar because I could make as much money at the factory and it was more fun. But the only real internship I had was because my college gave me a small stipend, and I was able to do that. And that's so critical for our students. I don't want them to forego these good opportunities that they find, and that we're happy to help them find.
Thank you. Dr. White, I'm not sure if you had this answer or not, but we're getting some questions about varsity athletics. Have we heard anything from the UAA about a fall sports season, or how COVID-19 may continue to impact our ability to host varsity sports, and what safety mechanisms we're looking at for our players?
So I was on a call today with other university administrators talking about the fall, in particular, fall sports. And like all the other questions you've asked about the fall, I can tell you that we have many groups working on plans, but we don't have any definitive answers yet. And of course, our highest priority is the health and safety of all of our students and our student athletes in particular. And as you can imagine, it's a really complicated set of questions, not only for our student athletes here at WashU, but for example, do we allow another team to come to our campus to play? Will we have a shortened season? If the season is shortened, what does that mean in terms of championship competition? What is the NCAA going to do? So all of that to say, we have many committees that are thinking about all of this, but we don't have a firm answer yet. And certainly we'll keep those of you who are parents of student athletes posted on that, particularly for fall sports. And a shout out to all of the spring sports that had to have their seasons abruptly canceled also. I know that was really heartbreaking, particularly for our seniors. So really feel empathy for all of our student athletes.
Rob, you mentioned that you are on the fall planning committee. And so lots of questions about fall, knowing that you on that committee are working towards answers on these, but a few that have come through are thinking about fall classes. If some do need to be online, how might distance learning be different in the fall than the spring? What kind of consideration is being made for courses that are not, lecture or seminar courses, like a lab or a studio? How is the university taking those things into consideration as we're making those plans?
That is a great question. And so in yesterday's meeting, all of the senior academic leaders are a part of this group. And so the decisions about fall, obviously we are built as an institution around in-person education, and for labs, for studios in the Sam Fox School, those are very hard to do remotely. As those of you with students in those areas, engineering is difficult to do remotely. I have to applaud our faculty who basically on 2 weeks notice in March stood up a second half of their course in an online fashion. But we know, we've talked to many of you, I've talked to many of you, I've talked to many of our students, it's not the ideal mechanism. I think ironically, we've gotten a lot better at it because of what the situation we've had to deal with, but it is difficult. And so, again, the theme here is we don't know. What we recognize is that there are some classes that do work better or are more manageable in an online format. The Dean of Arts and Sciences yesterday was talking about some things that the creative writing program had learned, just about how much easier it is in an online community for students to share their work and give feedback. But the Dean of the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts countered that by just saying how difficult it is to do an architecture studio. So you can hear in my voice, in my comments, that our goal is to try to figure out how to safely provide instruction in St. Louis in the fall. And that's the point where we're starting and trying to figure out, are there things that we need to think about with our classrooms and our studios around social distancing? All of the things that you all are reading about in the media about testing and the availability of testing are things that we are paying attention to, because we think that is going to be important for you all to feel safe to send your students here, as well as us, the faculty that are teaching students. We have on the committee, we have a great medical school here at WashU, and there are multiple infectious disease and public health specialists on this committee from our faculty who are advising us, who actually Dr. Steve Lawrence for Kirk Dougher has been providing almost daily guidance on our on-the-ground responses here. He's fantastic. Sometimes we call him our very own Dr. Fauci right here in St. Louis. A lot of knowledge, he's very, very straightforward with us in giving advice, and he's at the table with us. And so this is my roundabout way of saying we're working on it. Stay tuned. What the fall is, what I would ask every parent across the country of a student who is of college age is to realize that we're going to have to think differently about this next year. We're going to try to be innovative. The great thing about WashU is that we have a lot of creative people. We're not trying to say, well, how do we just make everything work exactly the way it worked? We're trying to figure out how do we provide a great classroom experience for our students given the circumstances that we have. And so we're just going to ask all of you to be a little flexible with us on how we deliver instruction, as well as how we structure the timing of our semester. Thank
I
you.
would also add that these are conversations that are going on across the country at all of the colleges and universities, and all of us, as Rob said, are trying to figure out how we can bring our students back in a safe way, deliver instruction in ways that are meaningful to students, understanding the health and safety challenges that we're all going to have to contend with.
Rob, a follow-up question that we've received from a few families is, there are a lot of reasons maybe why a student this fall is considering a leave of absence: their own health, a family member's health, financial reasons, concerns about traveling from where they are, like maybe they can't come from the place where they are because they have a travel restriction in their own country. What does leave of absence look like? Who would a student contact if they need to explore that possibility?
Yep, so great question. So at WashU, all of the leave of absence questions are handled at the school level. So starting with your academic advisor in engineering, the Olin School of Business, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. Those are the places that are already beginning to talk to students about those issues. It's interesting. I don't want to admit this to the 285 people on this call, but I'll just tell you, I lurk around on the parents' Facebook page. I'm sorry to tell you, I've seen many of you, the things that you're musing about, and it's a great community. It's a way that parents can share, their thoughts and ideas about the WashU experience. And one of the things in looking at that this morning, I saw a lot of comments on one of the strings that I was looking at about parents saying that their kids, if the university is not open in the fall, that they're going to pursue a gap year. Obviously that's a very personal decision for a student and a family. To me, again, it reinforces the point that I was making earlier, which is it is in all of our best interest to have at least some version of an in-person education this fall. Universities like us exist. You all have sacrificed a lot to get your students to WashU, and we want to deliver on the promise that we've made to all of you. And so we're going to keep working to do that, and just ask for your flexibility as we continue to modify how we think about what a semester looks like, what does in-person instruction in a COVID-19 pandemic look like. So bear with us.
Thanks, Rob. Kawanna, a couple more housing questions for you. If students are able to return to campus in the fall, as we all hope, what will be the new dates for students requesting early arrival for upper class housing? They were originally supposed to go live very soon in May, but with the unknowns that might happen, could you give some updates about that process?
Unfortunately, I don't have many updates. We're closely monitoring the conversations happen in the fall contingency group. That will be in alignment with whatever decision is made. And so more information to come. I'm sorry that I can't answer things more definitively, but certainly we're working on that. We're still planning move-in in our timeframes, but it's all date dependent on what the university will do.
I'm seeing a lot of questions about summer courses, and so I'm going to direct your families to the chat box. I'm going to have one of my colleagues put in information from summer school that was recently released. So summer school worked really hard to adjust the summer course offerings to be able to meet the needs of our students. So you will be able to see on the summer school website all of the courses being offered this summer, the tuition for those courses. There is some new guidance about what kind of courses grading will look like. This semester we've had a lot of flexible and altered grading policies. And so summer school has provided some guidance on what they anticipate this summer to look like, as well as guidance on if you would like for your student to take an online course elsewhere. Typically at WashU, we do not allow students to take online courses at other institutions because we really value the in-person experience. However, COVID-19 has changed the education world for everyone, and so we're being flexible with that and providing students with different opportunities for summer 2020. So if you'll visit the summer school website, they can best answer those questions. If you continue to have a specific question, please reach out to our colleagues in summer school as they are prepared best to answer those questions for you all. Kirk, I have a question for you. And again, this is one of those little bit of unknowns, but as students and families think about the fall, are there things they should be doing to prepare themselves now, thinking about their health and wellness, things that maybe they should be prepared to bring to school with them in person, or things that they could be doing over the summer to either educate themselves or just make sure that they're ready to start in the fall in the best physical and mental health that they can?
Yeah, certainly. Another good question. There are a number of things that I think that are really important for our students to be able to engage with. And our belief is that going into the fall, we're not going to be in a position where across the nation we've eradicated COVID-19. So part of the difficulty is to make sure that our students understand the importance of actually the really simple things that you've been seeing everywhere on the news, from the cloth face mask coverings to washing our hands to maintaining social distances. Those are some really good things, and as it turns out, impact the greatest amount of variance in the transmission rates that we've been experiencing and being advised by our medical and infectious disease experts. Beyond that, however, there are always some good things that students can do to be able to be prepared for their own health and wellness as they come to campus. And a couple of those would include making sure that they have a basic medical / first aid kit. The same kind of contents that you have at home are often very helpful for the students, because those are the medications they've been accustomed to taken for whatever has ailed them in the past. And to be able to provide for them that sort of thing is really helpful, to where when they call home and say they've got a sniffle, you can say, well, take this medication that you're used to taking, and that's already been provided for them. And many students aren't yet well versed in navigating their own health care. And that's often where Habit Health and Wellness comes in, is to try and help those students. Additionally, I would strongly recommend, even in the most normal of times, which this is not, that students have in their possession a thermometer. So as we know, one of the early symptoms that COVID is struggling with is with an elevated temperature. And even if that's not the issue, to know what a student's temperature is really helpful. And often that's an item that's forgotten in many of those first aid kits. So I would strongly recommend that students provide that. And then additionally, as they come to campus, make sure that they have with them an understanding of what your insurance coverage is, whether it's the insurance that we offer here or the insurance that you have at home, and also that they carry with them their prescription card. So if I was to take a survey, about 60% of you will say that your students carry their prescription card, and another 40% aren't sure. I'm pretty sure that about 90% of them don't. However, some of you have taken precautions, and this is what I would strongly recommend with both the prescription card and your insurance card, is to say, I need you to take a picture of this with your phone, and then sit there until they do. They'll mean to, but they might not unless you wait for them to do it. And once it's in their phone, then they know it's there and they can reference that. So those are a couple of other pro tips to make sure that students are prepared to be able to have that information with them at the time that they're going to need it, is especially to make sure that they have those items prepared for anything that they might encounter.
Kirk, a follow-up question for you. With the possibility of a second peak of COVID happening later in 2020, how is Habit preparing for this possibility, including if there would be locations for students to stay to ensure that they are not coughing in the same room as their roommate, sharing a bathroom, those kinds of things?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, the university is trying to take into account all the different scenarios in our planning for the fall, and to make sure, as Dr. White had mentioned, that health and wellness is at the top of our priority list to be able to take care of our students. Now, students living in close proximity to one another, and sometimes they also, they follow our instructions just slightly less well than they follow your instructions. So let that be a guide on how much they might be listening to some of the things we ask them to do. Some of them are outstanding. Some of them are still learning those things. But living in close proximity to one another obviously presents challenges for infectious issues, which is why the decision and the right decision was made by the university at the time that it was. However, going into the fall, rest assured that those scenarios are being taken into account. We are looking for how we might be able to make sure that we have quarantine spaces away from other students, so that our students who are suspected of having a communicable disease of some sort, a communicable infection, can have the room to be able both be comfortable and not run the risk of infecting other students. So all of those scenarios are taken into account. Dr. Wild, the chancellor, and several others are working very hard to make sure that we procure the opportunities for students to be able to be safe from the potential of reinfection and a potential second wave.
So Kirk doesn't know this because I haven't been able to talk to him this afternoon, but that is a great question. And so just to give you an idea of the planning that we're working on right now, normally during a regular year, Kawanna in her portfolio has a number of spaces in residential life that we use for quarantine housing. When you provide housing for over 5,000 undergraduate students, it actually is something that we need throughout the year at some scale, a very small scale. What we're trying to figure out this fall is what would that scale look like so that we could continue online instruction and move a slightly larger group of students safely off campus in a place where they could be comfortable, have good Wi-Fi, be fed, all the things that all of us on this webinar would be really important to us. And so we actually are planning, we had a planning call this afternoon trying to develop, how could we develop some off-site quarantine housing at scale to be able to address that. So I appreciate that. And I have to say on behalf of all of you parents, that idea was brought to us by a parent. A parent of a WashU sophomore was really helpful in contacting myself and a couple other people to bring some suggestions to us into that conversation. So great question, and just gives you an idea of some of the scenario planning that we're working on.
And just to follow up on one other piece that showed up in the questions, the students who have either had presumed cases or we are waiting on testing results or other kinds of things who we have had the opportunity to quarantine, Kawanna and her staff and also the dining services have done an outstanding job of trying to be able to connect to those students. And in many cases, figuring out ways that are socially distancing appropriate and also safe for the students to be able to bring to them food and other necessities that they have. The question in the Q&A also indicated that they were curious about how we were preparing for the fall with regard to Habif Medical. Habif Medical is staffed and we are trying to be able to acquire more providers moving into the fall to make sure that should there be an uptick in the number of students that have concerns or flu-like symptoms, that we're prepared to be able to deal with that. And despite some of the things that I think there's a confusion sometimes between how well-resourced Habif Medical is and how well-resourced Habif Mental Health is. And rest assured that we are attending to both of those issues and that we're trying to be able to make sure that students can be cared for, have food, medication, the other kinds of things that they need as they might go through a process of sickness.
Thank you. Mark, I have a question for you. Thinking for these students who, we mostly on this call probably have family members of first, second, and third year students.
Right.
So as they look to what life after college will look like in a year, 2 years, 3 years, probably going to be different than it was 6 months ago and what forecast we had. What resources are available to students to find jobs after graduation, and then to alums if perhaps they, they have a job now, but maybe it's no longer a job that they'll be able to go to in 6 months?
Right. So, first of all, just to remind all the parents, we never cut your kids off from the Career Center. They're always welcome. And in fact, I would say most years, about 15% of our appointments are with alums. They tend to be alums who have been out 1 or 2 years. Maybe they took a job and they want to do something different, or they're going back to grad school or something like that. I think, the situation is different, but in terms of what your students are going to do, it's the same. Specific steps that I would have your children do is, one, ask them, have they set up an appointment with a career counselor? We're here, we're available. All your children got an email from me. It was tailored by class year and by school, kind of reminding them, this was right after we left the university, to remind them we're still here, we want to help them. I didn't get a whole lot of response to that. I'm now having my staff reach out, and we've started with the seniors and we're working our way down. And I've assigned individual students to the counselors and said, you're responsible for making contact with the student because we want to get them engaged. And, you know, I know right now they're in the middle of exams and they're busy, but I just don't want them forgetting we're here as a resource. So that's one thing. We have a database of jobs. I checked this morning, we had over 1,000 postings of internships and jobs. So there are still opportunities out there. And I also want your kids to be creative. You know, and I think sometimes students forget this, that particularly for the summer, you know, they can create opportunities. So they talk to someone and then propose a virtual internship. Somebody like me might not have thought about that, but if you pitch it, most people are willing to give things a try. And also, you know, we still want for these first, second, and third year students, like you said, Catherine, they're trying to figure out what they want to do. And that process is a difficult one for many students. Most people don't know what they want to do with the rest of their life. And so this is a great time to be doing an informational interview with somebody who's doing something that they think they might be interested in. So I was talking to one of the students before we went on, and that's what I was encouraging her to do. Reach out to people who are doing this kind of work and say, how should I be preparing? How should I be preparing in this kind of environment? This is the perfect time to be doing that. But, you know, I keep saying this, but we're here. We want to work with your students. We're doing it every day, but encourage your student to reach out to us.
Thank you. Kawanna, a couple more housing questions. Study abroad is a bit of an unknown for many of our students who are hoping to study abroad in the fall or the spring as they wait to learn more about if their program will continue. For those students who were originally planning to study abroad in the fall or the spring, and if their program is canceled, is housing still available to them in each of those semesters, or is the answer different depending on fall or spring?
The answer is probably going to be different depending on fall or spring. For fall semester, we are going to be at a very high capacity in terms of our first year class and the current returning students who have already signed up for housing. But if anyone is interested in housing and their plans change, please email reslife at boostal.edu and we will work with individuals. We're working closely with Amy from Study Abroad office on the change of plans, and we certainly want to support students in the fall and spring, but it will be a bit tight in the fall as we have some other returning students and first year students. But just email us and we'll work with students on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you so much. So we're gonna have one last question for the evening. But before that, I would just like to say thank you to Dr. White. For those of you who do not know, she has accepted a new role as University President at DePaul University starting July 1. So we want to congratulate her and say thank you for her wonderful service to the institution. I can say it has been a privilege and an honor to get to work with you. So personally, I want to say thank you, and I know my colleagues echo those sentiments. And then I also want to say congratulations to Dr. Rob Wild, who will be serving as our interim Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, and then to Kawanna Leggett, who will serve as our interim Associate Vice Chancellor and Dean of Students. So you will see many of these faces again on our webinars in the fall, but unfortunately for us at WashU, it's going to be our last one with Dr. White. There are going to be some wonderful families at DePaul who get to work with you moving forward.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you to all the families out there. I have so enjoyed the opportunity to connect with you and really to work with all of your students. It's really been a blessing to be the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at WashU these past 5 years, and I am leaving with a heavy heart, but very excited about the new opportunity to serve as President of DePaul.
So families, as a reminder, if there were questions we were not able to answer during this webinar, we will respond to you via email. And we have your contact information because you did pre-register for this webinar. So we will email you all by the end of this week, and we will post this webinar next week. So panelists, thank you for all the information that you've shared tonight. And our last question is for you, Dr. White. What is one piece of advice you would like to leave our families with, both as they think about the conclusion of this is an academic year, but in particular, maybe as this being a unique academic year? What are your words of wisdom for all of us?
So my words of wisdom are, you know, as tough as this has been for all of us, this too shall pass. And I think all of us need hope that the institutions on which we have always depended, including colleges and universities, are going to still be there after COVID-19, hopefully one day, is in our rearview mirror. So just asking everybody to hold on to that, to stay safe and well, and to also look at this as an opportunity to reconnect with your children, with family members, because I certainly have never spent as much time as I've spent in the last month or two with my husband. And so really take this as an opportunity to reach out and touch those that you love, and know that we are so looking forward to seeing you back on our college campuses in the fall, in one way, shape, or another.
Thank you, Dr. White. Panelists, again, thank you for the information you've provided this evening. It's been very helpful for me to learn these answers, so I'm sure it's been helpful for our families. Again, families, we know we weren't able to get to all of those questions, and so we will be reaching out to you individually. We hope that you did learn some valuable information this evening. Again, as I said before, we're recording this session, and we'll post it to families.worcester.edu for you early next week. So please stay tuned for our 2020-2021 family webinar series that will kick off this fall. And in the meantime, please reach out to us at families.worcester.edu if we can be of support. We will see you soon. Thank you.